Welcome to the European Parliament for Talking Europe. I'm in Strasbourg today because each month all 766 MEPs and their staff commute from Brussels to Strasbourg in the French Alsace, and this to hold a 4-day plenary session. But this week, a majority of MEPs voted to demand a treaty change to have a single seat, possibly for all business to be conducted in Brussels. So is it time for the European Parliament to end this costly shuttle between the two cities? I will put a question to my guests in a moment. And in the second part of the program, I'll be joined by Daniel Cohn-Bendit, the iconic leader of the May 68 uprising in Paris. He's remained a bit of a rebel here in the European Parliament as the co-president of the Greens. Well, let me introduce you to my two guests today. They have very diverging views on the Strasbourg session, starting with you, Constance Le Gris.
Hello.
Welcome to Talking Europe. You're a French MEP from the centre-right European People's Party, the party of former French President Nicolas Sarkozy. Obviously, you want to keep Strasbourg. Also on this set, Ashley Fox. Welcome
Hello.
to Talking
Thank
Europe.
you.
You're from Britain, from the European Conservatives and Reformists group. That's the party of your Prime Minister, David
Yes.
Cameron. Now, you are the co-author of a hotly debated report here in Parliament. You call for the end of the so-called costly shuttle between Brussels and Strasbourg. Now, I remind our viewers that each month 25 trucks leave Brussels for Strasbourg, carrying 4,000 trunks of office documents for MEPs. In total, members of the European Parliament spend 48 days a year in the Alsace capital. Constance Le Gris, why keep Strasbourg as a seat for the European Parliament if you have everything ready for you in Brussels?
No, nothing is ready for us in Brussels. Everything started here in Strasbourg. Strasbourg is the only seat of the European Parliament. Of course, there are now, because it has been an evolution, which I deplore, there has been an evolution, and now we see that we have different working places, and that Brussels is one of our working places, and that our committees, our political groups are working more and more in Brussels. But Strasbourg is the seat of the European Parliament. It is written in the treaty. It is the city which has been chosen since the beginning of the European project, the beginning between France, Germany and 4 other countries. And I think that Strasbourg is really the symbol of what was the foundation of Europe, peace and reconciliation, and that it is also important that there is no main capital city. We are not building, I'm not in favor of building a federation, a European federation, so I'm not in favor of a European Washington DC.
Ashley Fox,
Yes.
as I said earlier, you telling MEPs enough is enough, I don't want to commute anymore. What is your view?
Well, my view is that the European Parliament should have one seat and that it should be for European MEPs to decide where that seat is. And Constance is right. In 1950, Strasbourg was a symbol of Franco-German reconciliation. But times change. And now the monthly commute between Brussels and Strasbourg is symbolic of all that is wrong with Europe. It symbolises a waste of money. It symbolises hypocrisy, because we waste 20,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide every year commuting between the two cities, and yet we lecture our citizens on reducing their emissions. And it also wastes thousands of hours of time as staff and deputies commute endlessly every month between these two cities. And what my report says is it doesn't say everything should be located in Brussels, it says we should have one seat. Because at the moment we're compelled to hold 12 sessions here in Strasbourg, and we're compelled to hold all our committee meetings in Brussels. And that is a ridiculous situation. And I would say to Constance and the others that want all the meetings in Strasbourg, fine, change the treaty. Let's have all our meetings in one place, and let's allow the deputies to decide.
We're going to talk about this in a moment. But first, I must say, seemingly a majority of MEPs agree with your report, as evidenced by Wednesday's vote. This story is brought to us by Mary Colombel and Isabel Romero.
483 to 141, a crushing majority. But does this vote bring an end to the so-called travelling circus? Strasbourg is the historical seat of the European Parliament. It was chosen as a symbol of reconciliation with Germany after the Second World War. Supporters of the report say that from a symbol of reconciliation it has become a symbol of waste as Europe tries to withstand austerity. They have estimated that the cost of travel and the building represents roughly 10% of the Parliament's annual budget, around 156 to 204 million euros, figures disputed by France and the Parliament's Secretary-General. But this week's vote may just be a symbolic victory. Aside from the arguments over the figures, amending the treaties to allow the European Parliament to choose its location requires the support of all EU governments. And France has said it would resist any such move.
There must be a sufficient number of days to allow the Parliament to hold plenary sessions here. This is part of the treaty, and we, as France, defend the treaty. And you know that in order to modify the treaty, unanimity is required. And of course, France is not willing to change the treaty on this point.
The adoption of this report won't change anything for now. But France may find its opposition unjustifiable as many European countries struggle through austerity.
Constance Legris, you were telling us it's not up to the member of the European Parliament to decide where they will be sitting.
That's my opinion.
That's
Absolutely.
your opinion. But now that we have this vote here, what will happen?
I'm not sure that the Council will be in a hurry to look after this report and to decide to say yes to the demand of the European Parliament. I think that the members of the European Council, all members of the European Council, know exactly that if ever one day we open the question of the seat of the European Parliament, we will, as an enormous Pandoras box, open in the same time the question of the seats of all other institutions. That will be the position of France, if ever the issue comes at the table of the European Council. Then, okay, you want to open a discussion, you want to work in favor of an eventual revision of the treaties, but then let's speak about all the seats of all the European institutions.
Do you agree that we might open a Pandora's box? Because
No.
after all, to change the treaties, you need unanimity of all 28 member states. Now, the French, their message is clear: over our dead body, we want to keep Strasbourg. The Belgians might not agree to repatriate the Parliament from Brussels to Strasbourg. It looks like a deadlock, doesn't it?
Well, no, because the amendment that we're proposing doesn't mention Strasbourg and it doesn't mention Brussels. It just says we should have one seat and the Parliament should decide. And I think we all know that in the next 5 years there will be treaty revisions. The Eurozone will want more powers for economic governance. So I expect the French and German governments will be coming to this Parliament, they'll be coming to the British Parliament saying we want treaty changes. And the position of this Parliament is if you want Eurozone changes, well, you're going to have to give us something. And that something is going to be control of the seat of the European Parliament. So I think that Monsieur Hollande and others should use their words very carefully, because they might find that this is something that they do have to concede to get the very important changes that they want in the future.
Now, on a practical level, you were telling us that you don't want to see a sort of European Washington, D.C. But a lot of MEPs are telling you it's easier for us to be in Brussels because we are close to the European Commission, to the Council. When foreign leaders are visiting the Commission, then they come to the Parliament as well. Isn't there a danger if you move to Strasbourg to be slightly isolated?
No, I don't think that in a modern world, you know, with all the modern IT, with all the modern technologies, there is a risk of isolation. And I don't think that Brussels and Strasbourg are so far away. I repeat that the members of the European Parliament are not living and are not established in Brussels. They're coming from their home countries. So they have to travel. It's part of the job. We travel all over Europe, and then.
But do you agree that the current shuttle is expensive? The Secretary General says that it costs 100 million euros each year. You mentioned 200 million, I believe, per year. Do you agree that the cost is no longer acceptable?
There are costs, absolutely. I'm not absolutely sure that the figures of the costs that Mr. Fox and Mr. Hefner put in their report are correct. There have been many different versions of figures, even from the campaign One Single Seat, even from the General Secretariat of the European Parliament. I have other figures, so the figures are very controversial. The figures put in your report are always counting and establishing the cost of Strasbourg. Why don't we speak about the cost of Brussels? There has been a lot of money spent when the plenary room was built in Brussels years and years ago, and there has been a lot of waste of money of the European taxpayers when people decided to build new buildings in Brussels and to build a new plenary room in Brussels. That was a lot of waste of money.
Your reaction?
Well, we can argue as to whether the cost is 100 million or 200 million euros a year. But whichever it is, it's too much. And it's disgraceful when in the member states, national governments are making painful spending cuts, that we in Europe are simply wasting this money. We're wasting carbon dioxide and we're wasting time. And I think that we make ourselves look ridiculous. There are some people that want Britain and other countries to leave the EU, and they hold up this travelling circus as a stick to beat us with. Now, I think there is good in the European Union. I think we can reform it and we can make it work for its citizens.
So what is the short-term solution?
Changing the Parliament is one of those things. The short-term solution is for the Parliament to propose a treaty change, that we have one seat. And we then ask the Council of Ministers to consider it as urgently as possible. And I hope that Constance and the French government can be persuaded that we should have one seat, and they should then take that argument.
We have one seat. It is Strasbourg. We have one seat.
The treaty says we hold 12 sessions here in Strasbourg, and we must hold all our committee meetings in Brussels. We do
not all.
Yes, it does, Constance.
No.
Read the treaty. We have two seats at the moment, and I want one. And I think that Constance and others should take their arguments to the deputies here and win the vote. Because I think Strasbourg is a beautiful city. It's much nicer than Brussels.
Much nicer than Brussels. Now, one question though, why did so many MEPs support the report? It seems like they agree this can no longer continue.
I think a large majority of MEPs, even some French MEPs, who knows, have agreed on the principle that the European Parliament should have the right of self-organization and should have the right to decide absolutely on a free level where he wants to work and where he wants to sit. I think that is not the good principle, that is not the job of the European Parliament. The question of the seat of the European Parliament, as the question of the seats of all European institutions, has to be dealt in a global way between European Parliament, governments, members of council and national parliaments. So we are not supposed to decide alone for some practical or personal convenience where we want to sit.
So what happens next? As I was asking you earlier, what is the timeline?
The timeline is that in the next mandate, after the European elections, I would expect the Parliament to propose the treaty change. And then during the next 5 years, the Council of Ministers will decide upon it. I expect there to be a constitutional convention of some sort. And the French government and others need to be aware that if they want their Eurozone changes, which I anticipate that they will want, there's a large group of deputies here in Strasbourg who are going to say to them, well, we'll concede to that, you can have those changes, but we want control of our seat. So I'm optimistic that within 5 years, the Parliament will have one seat. And then it will be beyond 2019 that a future Parliament decides where that seat is.
If the Parliament has one seat, it's most likely going to be Brussels, isn't it?
I don't know. We'll see. I just want to say that it is a little bit sad, from my point of view, that the first time the Parliament, the European Parliament, is officially demanding a revision on the treaty, it has demanded it for its own convenience and for the question of its own seat. There are many other issues on which we could have asked many major treaty revisions if ever it was this option who was chosen. Why having chosen that special question which is not in the heart of the concerns of our European citizens.
As Constance pointed out, it's the first time that the Parliament uses its new prerogatives, the Lisbon Treaty, calling for treaty change. This quarrels between the French and its partners, isn't this going to fuel Euroscepticism at the end of the day and prove counterproductive?
Not at all. I think this goes to the very heart of what the European Parliament should be doing. At the moment, our citizens see us wasting all this money, wasting all this carbon dioxide, and this travelling circus brings the whole of the European Union into disrepute. And I think were we to have a single seat, our citizens would regard us more favourably. And we would also do our job better, because this Parliament should hold the Commission to account. And that's very difficult when we spend a large proportion of our time shuttling back and forth. We would be a more effective Parliament if we were permanently in one place.
You don't agree. You fear that this debate will end up fueling Euroscepticism.
No, I agree with the idea of having all our activities in one city. And then it is a personal point of view, absolutely personal point of view, then it could be Strasbourg. Waste of money. I'm absolutely aware of the money of the European taxpayers. Of course, I'm involved in a political family which is always seeking for the better way of spending money of our citizens, of course. And cost killing is also something important for us, for me, and for my political family.
I think Constance is being inconsistent because she says she's happy to have one seat, providing it's in Strasbourg. Now, what we're saying is we want one seat and we will allow Euro deputies to decide.
And what are they likely to decide?
Well, I think it's likely that they would decide to be in Brussels because that's the most efficient choice. It would save the most amount of money, it would save the most amount of time and save the most amount of carbon dioxide.
Brussels versus Strasbourg. For now, we'll have to agree to disagree. Constance Legris, Ashley Fox, thank you very much for taking part in this edition of Talking Europe. Now, please stay with me. I'll return just after the news break. I'll bring you an interview with Daniel Cohn-Bendit, the iconic leader of the May 68 uprising in Paris. He's, of course, the co-president of the Group of the Greens, a very outspoken member of the European Parliament.